Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you to the Jamaica Plain Historical Society. It's always great to come locally to speak about Emily Greene Balch. Believe it or not, Emily Greene Balch is not remembered or known at Wellesley. It boggles my mind. It's the only Nobel Prize winner of any kind of discipline that we have at Wellesley, and people don't know her. So I'm really happy to come here to talk about her. And sorry, I will keep taking on and off my glasses to talk about her in this place that saw her, beginnings, really. I started discovering her when I was writing my PhD dissertation a century ago. And I was writing it on WILF, on Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Many of you will know it. There you go. The longest acting, I don't say the oldest, the longest acting international women peace organization in the world, still active today. And I came across Emily Greene Balch, as well as actually many women that passed by Boston or lived in Boston or in the Boston area for a while. So it's such an honor, a responsibility. I kind of feel like I wish, as I was driving here, I was thinking, I wish that I could have a recording of her voice or a video of her, because I feel so close to her, but I don't even know what she sounded like. But anyways, this presentation is from a chapter that I wrote for a book by Patricia Owens of Oxford, and Katharina Ritzer from Sussex University on women's international thought. And I wanted to write about her because I think that Emily Greene Balch has a lot to teach us for the contemporary times. She was a teacher and an activist like I am, but I think that her thought and her work really have something to speak to today, and especially when we think about gender, about race, about nationalism, about imperialism, authoritarianism, etc. And so she continues to be a real model for me. So she was, I guess, she was born in 1897, I think. She was fired from Wellesley. Did I get it wrong? No, I think more or less, right? 1866? 67, sorry, yes, something. But she was fired from Wellesley in 1919, and for her anti-war thinking and action, that's why she was fired. But then she won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1946. But I also want to say, just from the start, that I'm not thinking of her. I mean, I'm thinking of her as a model, but I'm thinking of her as an imperfect model, because she was human as everybody. And so I think that her work deserves also some critique and challenge. She's still widely unknown, including to feminist thinkers. But she really did some incredible pioneering work in certain in many areas, including economics, and she has a lot to say about imperialism abroad, racism internally, increased authoritarianism, and militaristic policing. I want to start also with saying that I think that there are three things that we need to learn from her. First, that her work stands out even among her contemporaries, because she saw the problems of racism, nationalism, imperialism, and war and economic oppression interconnected. She believed that these systems of oppressions worked against the unity and the oneness of humanity. She called this oneness of humanity the ontological unity of humanity. And she says humanity has a common interest at the bottom and common destiny, and these forces work against it. Okay. Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay. So she thought that imperialism and war were the result of a fundamental failure of human imagination, and fundamental failure of the human imagination to even imagine that we're all one, and that they rested on an economic system based on profits rather than human well-being, a cultural system that was organized around notion of racial and gender superiority and sexual inferiority, and an international system based on power-hungry states and that wanted to dominate others. If this doesn't remind you of the current system, I don't know what does. And then finally, I think one of the third lesson that I think we can take from her is the kind of old feminist adage that feminism is the radical notion that women are people. And so that instead of thinking of women as naturally or essentially different from men's, really she emphasizes that not only women's equality, but also women's responsibility to, and right to join in the political and economic affairs of any society. And as I said, while I think that there are these three things that we can learn from her, I want to caution us against idealizing her, idolize her, because she had her own blind spots, right? She also had her failures and her struggles as a white middle class or middle to upper class white woman in Boston, a very racist town, but also a town that has a legacy on racial equality. She had her blind spots there too, and she fought as well. She had some really serious arguments with women of color in Wilf about this. And I think this is kind of another thing that we can learn from her, because all of us have our own blind spots. We're human. We cannot like be perfect, right? And so what from her blind spots, we can also ask ourselves what our own blind spots are and how we can always kind of correct them or improve them or find them and help or learn from others or have others teach us how we can improve our blind spots. This is a picture. This is a slide with two pictures of her. One is her at 10 years old. The other is the last picture that we know of her just before her death. This is in 1960. She died in 1961. Balch was truly a scholar activist, right? She had essentially three careers. She first founded the settlement house, Denison House, in the late 1800s. She was an academic between the two centuries, and then she became an advocate at the League of Nations and the United Nations until her death in 1961. Also, a big shout out to Mercedes Randall, who was her student, but certainly her disciple, so to speak, and who wrote a phenomenal book that I still go back, in proper Bostonian. So almost everything that we know about Emily Greene Balch comes from that book. She was born in 1867, not 97, 67, in Jamaica Plain. Her house, which doesn't exist anymore, but is on the Women's Heritage Trail. And this is the plaque, the only thing that remains of her house. She died in Cambridge in 1961. She came from a prosperous family. Her father was a lawyer, aide to a senator. She was one of those first generation of women to go to college. She converted to Quakerism in 1921, but she was born and raised as a Unitarian. For a while, she and actually her Unitarianism kind of really influenced her. There was a Unitarian minister that played a really influential role in her life. Politically, she was a socialist, but she withdrew from the Socialist Party, or ceased to call herself a socialist in 1916, not because she did not believe in the ideals of economic, especially the economic ideals of socialism, but mostly because she believed that she lost faith in the state as an organization, as a form of organization of human affairs. And that's another thing that I think that I keep going back to, do we really need the state, especially states that are now really behaving against their own citizens? As far as personality and demeanor, that's what really I want. I would have liked to see what she was like, because people talk, or what we know about her was that she was reserved, but warm and generous, that she was elitist, but also so incredibly popular with her students. She was self-effacing, courteous. She never got angry, but also she was very stubborn, I hear, willing to compromise on principle, and in fact kind of also willing to do some menial, although she was elitist in a sense and she was upper class, she also was doing secretarial work for Wilf, doing very menial jobs. She wasn't afraid to work in humble tasks. She graduated from Bryn Mawr in 1889, excellent student, and in economics, and then sociologist. And then she went to France, where she studied and produced a book called Public Assistance of the Poor in France. And it's in France and in Europe that she starts developing sort of her consciousness, and also her consciousness about race. Remember that at that time, race was not quite divided as much along color lines, but it was about language and nationality. So at the time, right, it was also around color lines, but it was a slightly different configuration of race than we have now. And she started having contact with a lot of immigrants, and a lot of especially Slavic and Eastern European people, both in Europe and then later in the US. And that's when she started thinking about racial differences. At a time when the eugenics was a big, huge science, right? And Slavic people, Italians, were considered inferior races. This is Bryn Mawr at Wellesley, and then after the Nobel Peace Prize. So the first career, Denison House, she founded it in 1892. And Denison House took inspirations from Hull House in Chicago. She had met Jane Addams, and essentially she created Denison House with other Wellesley professors, actually, with people that were later Wellesley professors that were her colleagues, as a place to welcome and give educational services to a poor immigrant neighborhood. And this Denison House integrated educated women from Wellesley and other neighboring colleges with the urban poor in a living environment. She worked at Denison House. She later brought in Wellesley women. Interestingly enough, the Wellesley women worked and lived at Denison House. Balch never lived at Denison House. She went back to the comfort of her home, right? And she lived in JP. But Denison House became sort of a hub for women's labor organizing, vocational academic classing, and linked the settlement house movement, so the welcoming to and housing and education for immigrants, to the labor movement. And that's when she starts here also, like, really putting into practice this connection with immigrant workers. She joined Wellesley College later. This is Denison House. Sorry, I keep forgetting to skip to the.
Where is that?
The Denison House in Harrison was on Harrison Avenue.
Sure.
Is that downtown?
Hudson, between Albany and Harrison. I actually, I don't know well the neighborhoods of Boston to actually tell you what neighbors. I think it's South End. Yeah, South End. So I don't know where the South End begins. I don't even know what's the difference. If South is Southeast South End, or no, that's
South is further
South Boston.
and South Boston is kind of central.
Okay, yeah, see, I don't.
Is the other side of the Prudential from Copley.
Yeah, but I just don't know the names of the neighbors for me. Neighborhoods are weird. Okay, so she decides to go to Wellesley. She meets the chair of the economics department at Wellesley on a boat, coming back from a boat from Germany, and she joins the Wellesley faculty. This is Wellesley now, and Wellesley in the old Wellesley, the one that I think that burned down at Wellesley. So she becomes the chair of the Department of Economics and Sociology at Wellesley in 1913. As I said, very beloved teacher. She created some of the early classes on wage labor, even before the economic textbooks on wage labors were published. She then started teaching a course on immigration, and then she took a sabbatical and decided to do some research on immigration. So she went to Austria-Hungary first to understand the reason why Austro-Hungarian and Slavic people were migrating to the US. And then she traveled across the US to live in the houses of immigrants, as well as in settlement houses across the country, to study the reasons for immigration, the condition of immigrants, and especially the labor conditions of immigrants in the US. And she publishes a book called Our Slavic Fellow Citizens this is her in Austria-Hungary, her and with Hungarian immigrants or Hungarian citizens of Austria-Hungary. This book was revolutionary for the time, and a time when really the eugenics, so-called science of eugenics, was dominating scholarship. And even like very famous sociologists talked about, the inferior races. She talks about the human treasures that immigrants bring. She talked about the various facets of immigrant life, but also the culture of Slavic immigrant in the US, and also how that culture was affected by the discrimination and the labor conditions in which they lived. At the time in the United States, this nationalism translated really into fear and disdain for the immigrants. And on the part of the immigrant, there was this concern to maintain a national identity in the face of this discrimination. Again, this is a hostile environment for immigrants that we cannot not think about today, right? And what's happening in Minneapolis, for example. As part of this work, she also wrote an article that made a connection, explicit connections between eugenics, the pseudoscience of racial inferiority, racial nationalism, imperialism, and war. She connects these racist theories and shows them how they're connecting to fostering colonialism abroad. Yes.
What year would that be?
1915.
15?
1915. The book is 1913, and then the article is in 1915. So she says colonialism abroad, despite our saying that we are doing benevolent intervention, we're actually doing it because we're racist and because we're hungry for profits that these lands are going to give us. She calls nationalism a curse, and national vanity and greed that give us the war cries of the jingo and the imperialists, and of pan this and pan that, pan nationalism, pan Arabism, pan Americanism. So she decries our calling backward territories that and justifying colonialism because those people are backward. And she says all of this comes A, at the cost of peace, and B, at the cost of freedom for populations that have no protection against exploitation. So at this moment, she starts then getting more and more involved in international politics, precisely because she sees the nationalism of the US expanding into colonialism in places abroad. And in 1915, she joins the International Congress of Women at The Hague, which is the birthplace, of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. She goes to The Hague, and then she's tasked with going to Scandinavian countries and Russia to urge their governments to initiate mediation offers to stop the war that was going on, the First World War that was going on at the time. And then with Jane Addams and Alice Hamilton, she writes a book about the experience. The war radicalizes her so much that she moves more and more into leadership positions in feminist organizations. So she was among the founding members of People's Council of America. She's a publisher. The People's Council of America also publishes Four Lights. She was a founding member of People's Council for America. She published Four Lights, An Adventure in Internationalism, which is a publication of the Women Peace Party, which is in New York, the original Wilf branch in New York. And in fact, this Four Lights had two of their issues were censored by the United States Postal Services. And then it is this kind of adventure with Wilf that makes her really disliked by the leadership of Wellesley College. Kind of part of me thinks that Wellesley doesn't want to remember her because Wellesley did a really crappy thing to her. And in 1918, at the time there was no tenure. And so all the professors had to be reappointed. And in 1918, the Board of Trustees refuses to reappoint her. She was 52. So imagine being 52 and out of a job and a woman. She didn't know what to do, or she didn't have what to do. So in fact, she was left with no resources that her own brother told her, you're selfish. You're selfish to inject even to think that to mix the women's suffrage and women's emancipation issue that you worked with at Wellesley with the peace question. But really for her, women's suffrage, racial equality, women's equality, imperialism, and peace and militarism were all linked, right? She could not see how they could even be treated separately. This is the headquarters at the time of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. It was called Peace House. It still exists, but Wilf is no longer located there.
Where is that?
In Geneva. This is the Wilf US headquarters between the World Wars at 6 Byron Street. And okay, and then one of the big, I think the biggest contribution, another one of her books is called Occupied Haiti. So with Wilf in 1920s, in the 1920s, Balch is tasked by Wilf to go to Haiti. At the time, Haiti was occupied by the US. And she goes with a delegation of US people from different organizations and includes also including Addie Hutton, who was a member of Wilf, a Black member of Wilf that went with her. And with Addie Hutton, she publishes this book. They go first to Haiti. They conduct a thorough investigation. They speak to a number of people. They stay there several weeks. And Addie Hutton and Charlotte Atwood as well. They went and they do only an analysis of the effects of the American occupation on Haiti. Again, I just want to mention how important this is for today, as Donald Trump is thinking of invading or buying Greenland, right? A land that is already, by the way, colonized by Denmark, right? With indigenous people that are struggling for independence. But I want to say, and if we think about it, this report that is dated 1927 has three things that I think are relevant also for today. One, the report said, Americans think of the occupation of Haiti as a benevolent rule, right? We're doing them a favor to be here. But she said, this is BS, utter BS. We're not doing MFA. This is an armed occupation and a moral evil. It's a danger to US democracy, but it also is a danger to the people and the democratic development of Haiti. And it's in itself an unjustified use of power. It's based on force. It violates principles of self-determination. It doesn't matter how much improvements, so quote unquote, to infrastructure or education you make. This is an armed occupation and oppression. Second, Balch said also, Balch, Atwood, and Hutton together denounced the way in which American racism justified and sustained the occupation. We say it's benevolent only because we think of people of Haiti as inferior, right? We are racist toward people of Haiti. Are you okay? And not only we do that, not only we justify occupation and violence because we're racist, but also we by the very occupation cultivates in Haitians an inferiority complex. Because we try to hide our contempt, but everybody knows that people know that we think of them as inferior. And so there's no collaboration in that case. There's no dialogue, there's no conversation, because you cannot have a conversation with people that you think are inferior to you. That's not a relationship to be had. And then the third thing that she did, that they did, that I think was important, it dismantled the myth of the predatory Black man. If we're thinking today of the rhetoric about that certain segment of our society use against Black men, but also Arab men, right? And thinking that they are oppressing women, that the women in Arab country or Palestinians are oppressed by their men, and therefore it's the task of the enlightened white men and women of America to teach them how to treat women equally. That she said, and at the time there was, I don't know, probably you've heard of Birth of a Nation, that incredible racist movie, and it was very popular. President Wilson at the time had showed it in the White House, right? And in that book, she says, this is such bullshit, right? You are racist to the core, and there's no amount of fake, fake fake advocacy for women. Right? That what you're doing is actually exploiting women to exploiting women's inequality, the inequality of women in American society, to actually project it on other society. So the book basically at the end argued or asked the United States to leave Haiti, and to leave Haiti but first to figure out a way that Haiti could self-govern, right? So to leave Haiti, but get people from Haiti and leaders from Haiti together so that they could start rebuilding their country on their own terms, but leave it as an occupied, as occupiers. This book, like Our Slavic Fellow Citizens, the other book that she wrote, was not only about what Americans were doing abroad, but was kind of a look into a mirror on American society, right? A look exposing mirrors that expose the hypocrisy of an America that had the rhetoric of liberty for just some and not others, inside the country and outside. And a country that, while espousing this freedom for these ideals of freedoms and these celebrated men that fought for liberty from Britain, they were enslaving other people and denying that liberty for others. This is Adi Hutton, the co-author, one of the co-authors of her book of Occupied Haiti. And this is WILF's headquarters today. This is not far from the United Nations in Geneva. WILF today is still working to end imperialism, racism, environmental injustice, and peace. In the US, there is a section of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. There is a very active Boston branch, a very active Cape Cod branch, and it's still at the helm of radical peace movements. And so this is Emily Greene Balch, one of the heirs at WILF of Emily Greene Balch. A person that I truly admire is Ray Aitchison. Ray Aitchison is the director of Reaching Critical Will at WILF. Reaching Critical Will is the disarmament program of WILF with several other organizations. Ray Aitchison and Reaching Critical Will won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017, 2018. For their work on the treaty to abolish nuclear weapons. But if you look for Ray Aitchison's name on the web right now, look her up, because she writes really powerful pieces on the contemporary situations, linking the prison industrial complex to the military industrial complex, to economic imperialism, to racism, and she's really a strong voice in WILF and internationally. She writes for The Nation, she writes for Truth Out, she writes for, she has a piece, I'll tell you later, I need to look it up. She's a very good piece recently in a magazine, a radical magazine. Ray Acheson, like the Acheson. Ray Acheson. Okay, thank you. Ray, R-A-Y. She also has a legacy at Wellesley. This is the chapel at Wellesley, and I know she's not remembered at Wellesley. They don't talk about her. One of my colleagues wanted to give a presentation or do a presentation, an event on her for the 150th anniversary of the college, and the president said no. She's still in an uncomfortable place because she has uncomfortable ideas, right, that challenge even the existence of a liberal arts college that charges $100,000 for each year, right, to go. But we do have, we do remember her in a scholarship that we give every year to students to conduct work that is related to peace at the intersection of peace, militarism, and economic justice. And it's the class of 1950 that has given a permanent endowment for this scholarship in the name of Emily Greene Balch. I just want to quickly end this with some words that she used when she gave a speech an acceptance speech for the American Unitarian Association Award in 1955. She used these words of connection, unity, and growth. She said, "The time has come to break down the dikes and let the healing waters flow over us." I have another, it's not finished, but I don't. Hold on. This one. Okay, sorry. Let me do it again. The time has come to break down the dikes and let the healing waters flow over us. I see in us, young and old, the seed of the world that is to be. And this is what I kind of try to teach my students. They are the seed of the world. We are all the seed of the world. And if we want to make it happen, we have to act on it. And I am incredibly inspired by the people of Minneapolis that are facing the cold right now to stand up for their neighbors in small and big ways. So thank you so much for this, for the invitation. Thank you. Well, I'm happy to answer all questions. Yes. Yes, for sure. Thank you. Yes.
Could you talk a few minutes about Emily Greene Balch's period in Geneva between the wars, the two world wars? What was she doing?
So the question is if I can talk about the period, the time, Emily Greene Balch's work in between the wars in Geneva. She became Secretary General of WILF and basically maintained the organization throughout the two wars, and continued to develop the relationships with various women's organizations across the world, and develop new sections of the League and expanding the League. The work on occupied Haiti, the work when she went to Haiti, was done on behalf of WILF. So that was one of the things, but a lot of it was really a work of connection, like writing letters, incessant letters to the various branches, working at the League of Nations, Later on, when the war happened and then the UN happened, she also continued to be involved in the advocating for wealth at the UN, and in the she and Gertrude Baer, who became later Secretary General of WILF, were instrumental in making WILF with the ECOSOC, what's it called? I'm blanking now. One of the organizations that were formally accredited at the UN. At the League of Nations, I'm thinking of the many things that one other thing that they did at the League of Nations is argue for the increased representation of women in the League. So the work was very closely related or associated with the League of Nations, and then later, as it is now, with the UN.
Yeah. Sense of what her upbringing is like, childhood, why she might have gravitated so strongly.
Yeah, the question is, if I have a sense of her upbringing and why she gravitated this strongly in the direction. Yeah, she had a very loving family. She admired her father, who was involved in politics in some ways. I think that mostly her sense of, well, two things. One is her upbringing as a Unitarian. The church was really, the pastor that she had when she was growing up was really instrumental in cultivating her sense of justice. And then the other thing, the network of women. She gravitated around a lot of women-only spaces. So Bryn Mawr, Wilf, Wellesley, she had tons of women friends, and it was in that space where the connections were made, right? There were women of all sorts of economic backgrounds through Denison House. So Denison House was a settlement house only for women, right? So all those women, so the immigrant women, the students, the teachers that she had, the colleagues at Wellesley, a lot of them were socialists as well. None of them was fired, right? Only Balch was fired, because I think that what really pissed Wellesley off was not the socialism, but the pacifism, being against the war. So I think that those two are the biggest influences. And of course, I mean, she did have a loving family that cared about giving back, but sort of in a very elitist way, in a sense. But yeah. Welcome. Yes, Gretchen. Oh, thank you.
Okay, so how was she received in the United States at the time when she was most active in health spending?
I actually don't know if I don't know that she was well known at all. Jane Addams was hugely popular, right? And Jane Addams was her friend, and at the Jane Addams was at a time hugely popular for Hull House, and then also when she came out as pacifist and was against the war, also hugely hated. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that Balch had the same fame, because she wasn't really one to speak out necessarily in public. So although I do have to say that Wilf was subject to scrutiny in the 30s, in the 50s, McCarthyism targeted Wilf as well, but also before. The Red Scares in the 30s was like, but I don't think that anything happened to her particularly. She was very reserved in general, so I don't know that they knew her. But I might be wrong. Yeah.
I wonder what ethnic groups Denison House served.
What ethnic groups Denison House served? I think that at the time, primarily Slavic and Italian, and Southern Europeans, Greeks. Yeah, those were the big immigrant waves at the time. in that, yeah. So Hungarian, Polish, yeah, all Eastern Europeans and Italians. And I think Greeks in minor, like a smaller part, yeah. Yep.
Yes, when did she convert from Unitarianism to Quakerism, and did that impact her ideas about pacifism?
So when did she convert from Unitarianism to Quakerism? I think it was 1921. And I think that she did it because of pacifism. She was, because of Quakers' commitments to nonviolence and pacifism. And that's was her main reason. But I don't think that she sees, I mean, the influence of Unitarianism was still there. It's just that Quakerism, I think that also Quakerism kind of was more her temperament in worshiping. As I said, she was a very reserved, kind of quiet kind of person. So, but I don't know. For this, you would have to really ask, I wish she was alive too, Mercedes Randall, who knew her very, very well personally. Yeah.
I have two questions online about connections, so we'll combine
Yeah.
them into one. Did she work with Eleanor Roosevelt, and what was Balch's relationship to the Communist Party?
To the Communist Party? Okay, I don't think that she worked with Eleanor Roosevelt.
Repeat the question, please.
Sorry, if she worked with Eleanor Roosevelt and what was her relationship with the Communist Party. I don't think that she had any relationships with either. I don't, you're asking me a level of details that I'm not necessarily remembering from her biographies, but I don't think that she ever worked in any close relationships with either. She probably, my thinking is that she probably met several members or even leaders of the Communist Party of America in her work because of the work that she was doing, but she was never a part of the Communist Party of America at all. Yes.
You mentioned very briefly that she questioned the need for the state.
Mm-hmm.
Did she ever put forth a theory or a positive vision of how society should be organized, both in terms of politically and economically?
So the question is whether Balch put forward any vision on how a society could be organized without the state. Yes, there is someone, I think, that is researching that, because she didn't put one vision out. She wrote several pieces on internationalism and how that could work, or how the world could be organized in a world parliament without states. But not one vision, one single vision. So there are several pieces that she wrote about that. And I think Glenda Sluga has written or is writing or is researching all these different pieces. She wrote incessantly. She has like hundreds of pieces in various newspaper, journals at the time. She wrote also a lot of, believe it or not, book reviews. Everything that she was reading, she was writing a book review for some publication. So one would have to collect all those to kind of put together that vision, but she didn't write one book on that.
You mentioned she passed away in 1961.
Yeah.
Are you aware of anything she may have said about nuclear power?
About nuclear power?
Yes.
Yes. So whether Balch said anything about nuclear power. Yes, she wrote, she and Wilf were since.
Zero gravity, WhatsApp audio.
Sorry. I don't know where my phone is. Oh, yeah, here. I forgot to silence it. Yes, she, so needed, so nuclear weapons were anathema and are anathema to Wilf, for sure. At the very beginning of the nuclear age, she and Wilf we're not quite making the connection between nuclear weapons and the nuclear industry. So they were, while absolutely horrified that the nuclear bombs, the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and horrified about the nuclear arms race and its connection to profit, economic profit and imperialism and all of that, they were also seeing the potential of the nuclear industry to give energy, clean energy for the future and technological developments. That kind of changed later on. I don't think that that Balch arrived at that point. But one thing that she, as well as many of the women of Wilf, thought, they said, once the bomb dropped, they said, now they were ironically optimistic, because they said, well, now that this has happened, now that we have this unbelievably destructive weapon, who in their right mind would start a war? I think that they were disabused of that naivete, so to speak, very soon, right? But that was at first that was their thinking. I don't think that they were alone in thinking that, because after what they saw, I said, I mean, we cannot think. I still thinking that way, right? Why would you bomb Iran? Why would you, it could explode at any moment. I don't know how it hasn't yet. I don't know how nobody has hit the red button. And I think that that's what they were thinking. They were thinking, well, now that we have that, nobody's going to start a war ever again. But they did.
We have a couple questions from the Zoom audience about her personal life, and specifically, did she have any kids?
So did she have any kids? No, she never married. She had long-term relationships with women I now am blanking on one particular one that she lived with for a long time, and so-called, I don't know if you know the term Boston marriage, right? But I don't know. She never said. She talks about the love that she has for this woman, but it could be friendship, it could be platonic. I don't know. But yeah, no, she never had kids.
Somewhere you mentioned that there was some tension between the Black member of trip to Haiti.
Not the one in the trip to Haiti. There was another
please.
member, Black member, one of the early member of Wilf that went at The Hague as well. This was something that actually happened also between the war. In the 1920s, the French used Algerian soldiers in the Ruhr, the area that was contested between Germany and France, to occupy the Ruhr against the Germans. And many peace organizations, including and also Balch, used the rhetoric of the Arab man who is in an area with white women to argue against the occupation of the Ruhr by the French. And this Black member of Wilf, and again, another name that escapes me, she called Balch on it. She said, This is BS. You're using the same rhetoric that the occupiers use against men of color to defend, white women's purity. We should just talk about the exploitation of these men that are used as military, they are used to occupy an area by power that occupies their country, right, and colonizes their country, and they have to do it because they have to do it because they're ruled by the French, B, because of economic necessity sometimes, and then you're on top of it, you're accusing them of violating white women. You should be arguing against this power that is a colonizing power, not against the men. So that was a big riff with them. And in fact, I think here, Jane Addams kind of intervened to mediate between the two, and Wilf changed their talk on that. Thank you again.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. There's plenty of refreshments. Please, fuel up for your trip home. So it's cold outside. Thank you, everybody on Zoom. And we do have upcoming events, and also the Rosendale Historical Society has an event on January 29th about the oldest business in Rosendale. So I'll put this flyer in the back. We have a sign-up sheet for our email newsletter and also membership forms. If you're not yet a member, we would love for you to join, but you don't have to. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Close, stop sharing.
The Historical Society folks here.
Yeah.